on my young, there's some savages running your trap, at you up for them packages. Rob you for bricks, finesse you for pounds. Fuck all that talking, they laying you down. Gotta teach niggas about playing around. Cartel connected, you better respect it. Fuck up the paper, send you to your maker, they laying you 6 feet under the...
What's up, guys? Mr. Octagonal here from Octagonal Sports / Reacts. So for the next few days, I want to be uploading my draft grades on this channel. Of course, the draft was last weekend, and it did take me some time to make these. It takes like a week to make them. Usually a little less. I guess this year it took a little bit longer. But today we're going to start with the AFC East. Of course, the Cleveland Browns, they have the #1 overall pick, as well as the #4 overall pick. The Ravens had 2 first-round picks, and then the Bengals and Steelers are also in the division. So first, we're going to be looking at the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are in a really interesting spot. They don't really have that great of a future. Andy Dalton probably won't be their long-term guy for the next 6-7 years. And they still have Marvin Lewis as their head coach. And I'm not too huge on their draft. I'm giving them a C+. I didn't really like it, as their offensive line does suck, but they sorta fixed it, as they did originally have the 12th pick, but they traded that to the Bills. They got pick 21, as well as the Bills left tackle Cordy Glenn. I don't think that's great value for the Bengals, but their offensive line is so desperate that they need anything that they can get. Cordy Glenn's a very solid player, and he'll definitely start, but I'm pretty sure he is on a big contract. So with that first-round pick, they took Billy Price, an interior offensive lineman from Ohio State. He's a talented player. I'd say early second-round talent, but he did have an injury in college. Now, doctors say he should be good to go, but it's still a little concerning, so I would move him down to like late second round. So if they're taking a late second round player, in my opinion, in the late first round, so I don't think that would be great value. I think Will Hernandez or James Daniels would have made more sense, and I think they were better value at that spot. Jesse Bates for third in the second round. It fits a need. He's a very talented player, and it isn't a reach. I'd say mid-second round is about where he should have gone, and he did go there, so I think that's a good pick. Sam Hubbard and Malik Jefferson in round 3 are kind of similar, good players, and they sort of fill needs, as the Bengals do have many talented defensive ends in Carlos Dunlap, Jordan Willis, Carl Lawson, and Lawson just finished their rookie years, and Carl Lawson was great last year, but I guess they want to go with the Eagles strategy, which is a rotation with defensive linemen. So I guess that's what they're going to do with Sam Hubbard and Malik Jefferson. He's a pretty talented player as well. I think mid-third round is good value for him as well as Hubbard. And then on day 3, Mark Walton, the running back from Miami. That's nice value in the 4th round. And Auden Tate, right at the end of the draft in round 7. I think that's great value. I viewed him as a 4th round prospect. I think he's a pretty underrated player. Now we have the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens had an interesting draft, as they are similar to the Bengals, where they're not really in any direction. They did almost make the playoffs last year if it weren't for that Tyler Boyd touchdown on 4th down. But even though they almost made the playoffs, they're still not really in a direction. Sort of like the Bills are. Well, now the Bills have Josh Allen, so maybe they are in a direction. But before the draft, it didn't look like the Bills were really going in any sort of direction. And that's where I see the Ravens at. But this draft could change that. Keyword is could, as it was GM Ozzie Newsome's last draft. Ozzie Newsome, he's a very good GM. He made some nice moves. He went out with a bang. So Hayden Hurst, he's not my #1 ranked tight end, simply because he's already like in that 24, 25 years old range. And I think that's way too old for a first-round pick. That's also why Calvin Ridley isn't my #1 ranked receiver, even though he's only 23. So I think Hayden Hurst is a little old. I think he should be very productive right away, but I just view him as a mid-second round prospect just because of that age. But it isn't a terrible pick. Lamar Jackson is a very interesting pick. He is very raw, but he is Michael Vick, or prime RG3 potential. Prime RG3 isn't rookie RG3 potential. Of course, RG3 is actually on the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson is a quarterback. I think he has a good enough arm. He has the arm talent. He's just very raw. He obviously has the physical skills, as I said, like a Michael Vick, even an RG3. I guess RG3 can maybe teach him not to get injured, to watch out for his needs. Orlando Brown in round 3, he's a very solid player, but he did have an absolutely atrocious combine. If it weren't for that combine, he would have been a first-round pick. Mark Andrews, he should be a very good complement to Hurst. I viewed him as a late second-round prospect. I guess they really wanted tight ends, as Crockett Gilmore might not be cutting it. Max Williams, he looks like a bust. I don't think Dennis Smith's on, or Dennis Pitta, not Dennis Smith. Dennis Pitta, I don't think he's on the roster anymore. So I guess they think Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews can be a nice 1-2 punch for Lamar Jackson or Joe Flacco, I guess, this year. And I think they will be a good duo at the tight end spot. And Deshaun Elliott, he is a very good pick day 3. I thought he is a third-round prospect. And Jordan Lasley and Anthony Everett are also good day 3 value picks. Now we have the Steelers. I think the Steelers actually had a pretty underrated draft. In the first round, they drafted the safety Terrell Edmunds from Virginia Tech. Now, that is way too high. That's why the Steelers have gotten low grades, and that's why I'm tempted to give them a B or even a B-. The Steelers probably thought they were picking Tremaine Edmunds instead of Terrell Edmunds. Terrell Edmunds, I would say he's an early third-round prospect. So all these teams in the AFC North are taking reaches, and when we get to the Browns, we'll continue that reach trend. But round 2 and round 3, day 2 of the draft, I think the Steelers hit some home runs. They traded up for Mason Rudolph in round 3. I'm very high on Rudolph. I think he has a very good chance of being their franchise quarterback. I had him graded ahead of Josh Rosen as well as Baker Mayfield. And I had him very close to Lamar Jackson. I think I had Lamar Jackson a smidge higher than Mason Rudolph. So I think Mason Rudolph can be very good. I do like Josh Dobbs as well, who they took in the 4th round last year. But I guess he's not their guy. And I can't imagine Landry Jones is going to stay on the roster. He's the odd man out because obviously they're going to start Big Ben. And then they have Mason Rudolph. They're not going to cut Rudolph. And then they'll probably cut either Dobbs or Landry Jones. And I think it makes much more sense to cut Landry Jones. And what a better way for Mason Rudolph to, get chemistry by taking his college wide receiver, James Washington, Mason Rudolph's favorite wide receiver in Washington in round 2. I don't know if they knew they were getting Rudolph in round 3 when they took James Washington in round 2. But I think that'll be a very good duo. They played very well together in college, and now they're in the pros. They have that chemistry. I think it'll be good for them. Chukwuma Okorafor in round 3, I think that's a pretty good value pick. I viewed him as an early to mid-third round prospect. And then Marcus Allen in round 5, I think that's a great pick. I viewed him as a third-round prospect as well. I think that's a very nice pick for their secondary. Last but not least, we have the Cleveland Browns. I've seen the Browns get a lot of grades in, the B range, but I'm giving them a D+. And here's why. The Browns, they did have an okay draft, probably worth a B or a B-, but it's a D because of one pick, Baker Mayfield. You guys probably know my opinion on Baker Mayfield. I think he's a bust, and he's getting drafted by Cleveland, a team that does not know how to develop quarterbacks, and a player who I already don't think will pan out in the NFL if he got drafted by any team. He's already 23 years old, and I don't like that older age. He does not have a gigantic arm, sort of like a Josh Rosen or Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen would be a better example. Josh Allen's arm is gigantic. He can launch bombs, and bombs. Obviously, Allen is more raw, but Baker Mayfield doesn't have a gigantic arm. He's not as much physical upside as Josh Allen either. That's why I had Josh Allen as my number 1 quarterback, because he has physical upside. He has a gigantic arm. He's a boomer bust, which is why I had him in my number 1. I could be very wrong about Josh Allen, but that's why. Baker Mayfield does have some off-field stuff. He did get arrested last February. Of course, the thing against Kansas with the grabbing the crotch, and that was pretty ugly. He's small. He's only about 6 foot. He's pretty mobile, but he's not like Russell Wilson mobile. There have been a lot of Russell Wilson comparisons, but I don't think he has the mobility that Russell Wilson does that makes Russell Wilson so good, as he's mobile enough to not have that as a liability, but he has a good enough arm so he can use his mobility, but he also isn't like an RG3 where he's always running it. Or even a Lamar Jackson, potentially. Denzel Ward at 4 is a little high. I think Bradley Chubb or even Quentin Nelson would have been better value, but it fits a need, and they're getting a really talented player. I think I had Ward as my number 5 or 6 player on the big board, so that's not too big of a reach. Austin Corbett in the 2nd round is probably a tad high. I'd see him more of as a mid to late 2nd round pick, but he is a very fast riser. He can play tackle as well as guard, and their offensive line did get a lot worse with the retirement of Joe Thomas. They did sign Chris Hubbard, but that was a terrible signing. 5 years, $40 million for a guy I've never heard of. That just made no sense. Nick Chubb, he has an injury history at Georgia, and I thought there were a little bit better running backs on the board. Ronald Jones, Kerryon Johnson, Darius Geis, but I still think that's a pretty good pick. Antonio Callaway in round 4. That is a really interesting pick. First or second round talent, but has had a number of off the field issues for a while now. Having most teams not have him on their draft board, there was a very good chance he could have gotten undrafted. The Browns did something similar with another Florida Gator last year, defensive tackle Caleb Brantley. But just Brantley's off the field thing came like 2 days before the draft, and we've known about Callaway's stuff. He was tested positive for marijuana at the combine. So the Browns, they had an okay draft, but I think Baker Mayfield's a bust, which is why I give them a low grade. Hope you guys enjoyed. Next division will be an NFC team. I do know, but I'm not going to tell y'all because I want it to be somewhat suspenseful. So drop a like and subscribe if you've not already. We're almost at 100 subscribers. Thanks for watching all the way through the video, unless you just skipped to the end. Just thanks for the view. I'm out. Peace.